What was your upbringing like?
Sorry?
What was your upbringing like?
Happy, very happy. I mean, my dad was a bus driver. My mum was a char lady. She cleaned houses. My dad died early because he had a chronic heart condition, which is rather runs in the family, I think. But it was all love and, kids don't notice you're poor, do they? I mean, I didn't find out I was poor till about 11, so it was all right.
Was there anything that ever happened to you that you look back now and taught you a valuable life lesson?
Everything. I mean, my father being so ill and having taught me never to waste an hour of my life, that was probably the best life lesson I've ever had, because you never know. He used to say to me, you never know when it's your last hour. And he was quite right. He died at 45 or 44. And the other lesson I learned was no one gives you anything. So you've got to go and get it yourself. And I learned there was 2 or 3 ways to go and get it. There was the wrong path, which I didn't take, although I lived in an area where a lot of people did. Then there was the right path, but I was no genius. So not being a genius, the only thing that was left to me was to develop a work ethic that no one else could match. And that's what I concentrated on. So in other words, I realised quite early I wasn't a genius. I was smart without being super smart, if you like, academically super smart. But I had a work ethic, and bearing in mind I never wasted a moment of my life, and that put me in an unassailable position because no one could compete with me because of my relentless approach.
Just want to touch on, you mentioned there about not taking the wrong path. Was there a moment where you purposefully thought, no, I'm not going to do that, or was there ever any temptations?
There wasn't a temptation. When I was 12, my mother famously came home from a bloke's house she used to clean, and she said to me, and I can remember visually because it was quantum moment, she said, I know what you're going to be when you grow up. Now, you've got to bear in mind where I was living. And I said, what's that? She said, you're going to be a chartered accountant. And I said, what do they do? Because I'd never even heard of it. And she said, I had no idea. But the man whose house I clean said to me today that you never see a poor one. And that phrase, you never see a poor one, meant that from 12 years old, I was, without even knowing what it entailed, was enough for me to say, I'm going to be... So I never, for 1 second, looked at going down the wrong path, because I had a career path from the age of 12 in my mind, if you follow me.
You did qualify as an accountant as well, so...
Yes, I did. No, it was the beginning of my journey, was qualification as the youngest, youngest member, the youngest child accountant, and certainly the youngest fellow of the institute. So, again, it wasn't difficult. It was just about putting the graft in, learning, giving up, sacrificing your early teens, not going out. I paid the price, but as you can see, it was a price worth paying. It gave me a wonderful start in life and something that has been useful to me throughout my career. So it was a win-win. But I owe it to the fellow that said you never see a poor one, because that was the phrase that stuck in my mind.
So how did you go from an accountant to, running Matchroom and founding Matchroom?
Well, I mean, I was quite successful as a young accountant. I was a salesman as well, so I was pushing fees up, and my career was growing quite quickly. Although I never had the family background ever to be a partner or anything like that, because I didn't go to university. There was no money in my family, and in those days they were important criteria for promotion, which I never ticked that box. And I was doing an audit in 1973, and they offered me a job. They said, why don't, there was a successful textile and fashion business, and they wanted a finance director, and they offered me the job. I took the job. I diversified the company into other things, one of which was owning a chain of billiard halls, snooker halls. which I fell in love with. And in 1980, the company had some problems. It's a long story. I ended up owning a third of the company, and I solved all the problems. And in 1982, I sold the Snooker Hall company, and in 1982, I started Matchroom. I made quite a lot of money. I thought it was enough to retire on, but I was only 34, so I thought I'd better do something to have an interest. By then, I was looking after Steve Davis's fledgling career. He'd won the World Championships the year before, so I thought, well, I'll form a I'll form a little company and I'll just do snooker events and look after a few players, have some fun, make some money. It doesn't really matter because I've already got money. And we started underneath the Snooker Hall with a secretary and a part-time bookkeeper. That was in 1982, and today we're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, sports company in the world. So it's been good.
Why did you take the step into boxing? Was there always an interest in boxing at your end?
Yeah. I've always had a fascination with boxing. Even when I was sort of 7, 8, 9 years old, I'd be listening to my little radio underneath my bedclothes, 4 o'clock in the morning, with fights coming in from America. You know, the early Ali fights and Archie Moore fights and things like that. I don't know why, because my dad was, he was never a physical type of person. But I just every time you saw it on the news, I found it fascinating, and I developed a love for it. I mean, I never really, in those days you might have had a few problems on the street, but I didn't join a boxing club until I was 27, So, I was a bit of a late developer because I concentrated on my career first. But I never lost a passion for it, and I was dreadful. I mean, I was at Waltham Forest Boxing Club and then Garden City. No fights to mention, got beat up by everybody, just like the one-to-one stuff. I just like the training, and I loved the sport, but it gave me an appreciation of boxers. Or they were all better than me. I was literally dreadful. Broke my shoulder sparring heavyweight in the end, and that was a light heavyweight, so that was a good excuse for me to stop being so silly. But I never lost it. I still went to the fights. I went to the old Mickey Duff fights and Jarvis Astaire and all those sort of stuff. Went to the ABAs, used to follow a lot of kids. I knew a lot of the kids around from that area. You just don't lose it. And then 1987, Terry Lawless, who was looking after Bruno and worked with Duff and all that, as you probably know, said to me, you're promoting snooker events. Why don't you? I know you love the boxing. Why don't you do a boxing event? I did a couple of small shows with Gary Mason, God rest his soul. And then I thought I need to do something big to keep my interest. And somehow or the other I fluked Frank Bruno against Joe Bugner, which ended up being one of the biggest watch shows in the history of boxing in the UK. And then the die was cast. The drug had been injected into my veins. And I love it. I mean, I think of all the 12 sports I currently promote, boxing still gives you that one night special that nothing else touches.
You mentioned you've done a bit yourself, sort of in the gym sparring and whatnot. Does knowing what, putting your body through that and training yourself, does that give you a different kind of respect and knowledge for your fighters?
So. I hope so. I think it should do. I hope it has. I've always been quite hard on myself physically. Like I run marathons all around the world, triathlons, things like that. But nothing is better than putting gloves on. I mean, I know it sounds stupid. I'm 72, but I wish I could do it tomorrow because, and again, I stress. I was dreadful, so don't worry. I couldn't beat my wife. And certainly the last session I had, you must know, was against Eddie. He was 16, 6 foot something, and heavyweight. I thought he was getting a little bit of a lippy rich kid. I took him down the gym for 3 rounds of proper. I said, we'll have a proper tear up. And he dropped me twice in the second round. And I thought, I was 45 at the time. I thought, this is not good. And that was the last time I put the gloves on. But my old pal Freddie King from Oxton was a decent lightweight. We were in business with a fruit machine business we owned in the East End. He said to me when I was about 27, you're getting fat, you're smoking, you're doing it. Come down the gym. And immediately I walked in, I just loved it, and I stayed there a couple of years. Just enjoyed myself, you know. And Freddie trained me, and I mean, like everything else, you don't, to do any sport, you've really got to play it a little bit to understand what's involved. And you don't need to play. You don't play at boxing, but even basic training lets you know what special athletes these people are. And you should respect the people you're working with. I do. Every athlete I work with, I respect the fact that have got ability far more than I ever had. And that puts you in the right mate. I mean, that sounds a bit old-fashioned when you get older, but making money's great, you know. But at the end of the day, to be involved with something that you're passionate about is even better, you know. And I'm passionate about sport generally. Boxing, yes, but that's, as I say, it's one of 12 sports I do. I'm passionate about darts and snooker, you know. All these things, I love them. I love the competitive edge of it, and boxing sits right at the top in terms of the price you have to pay, the sacrifice you have to make. And in business, I've done the same thing as a boxer would do in preparing for his sport. I live my life on the same sort of basis, but very seldom does anyone punch me in the face.
What's your most memorable moment promoting boxing?
Probably, I mean, obviously, you know, from the point of view of I didn't know what I was doing, and I winged it into a massive success. But probably I would say Eubank Ben in 1990, the first fight. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd gambled a lot on Eubank being the real deal. I thought, you know, I think boxing can make all of us look ridiculous, doesn't it, when we make predictions and things like that. But I thought Eubank, with his style, was as good a bet as you could possibly have to beat Nigel Benn, and I put everything on it, and it came off, and it was very exciting because it was our breakthrough moment for both of us. It's a bit like when Steve Davis won the World Snooker Championships in '81. That was a breakthrough moment for me of enormous proportions, suddenly to have a world champion. And Eubank wasn't that far away from the same type of thing, you know. It was a breakthrough moment against the establishment, against Duff, against Warren, because that you suddenly had the biggest name in British boxing, and he actually performed on the big stage. So you couldn't underestimate that. I think that was a quantum moment for me in boxing.
You just mentioned there Frank Warren. It always seems to be, you know, talk of rivalries. Outside of business, is there even a rivalry?
No, there's no rivalry in business. I don't know where people get this from. How can there be a rivalry? It's weird, you know. I don't know. I've got to be ever so careful because I don't want to talk down to anyone. I don't wish harm to any human being in this world. I mean, life's too short to do that. And rivalry involves considering we're on the same level. We're not. I mean, it's a stroll down company's house. You know, someone said to me the other day, you know, it was the same sort of question. I get this question all the time, but there is no rivalry. Frank is a boxing promoter. He is what he is. But Matchroom is a global company. I mean, it's not. From a boxing, is there a rivalry in boxing? I suppose you could argue yes. But again, Eddie, as a boxing promoter, is on an entirely different level globally than Mr. Warren. And so I wish Frank all the best. And it's a tough business, and he's obviously found it very tough over the years. And we've built a global business, so there is no rivalry other than, you know, of course we want our fighters to be his fighters, and he wants his fighters to be mine. But rivalry, I always think is, you know, it encourages you to think it's a fair fight, which it's not. It's a mismatch.
Talk to me about, now this I didn't know about this until I read your Wikipedia page. Seems to be quite a turning point in your boxing career, and that was High Noon in Hong Kong.
Well, it was just another statement of the type of people we are. You know, had come up with this idea to do this show in Hong Kong. We had Herbie Hyde on, and Steve Collins, and people like that on. And it just didn't smell right when I got there. The guy that was promoting had a schedule of payment dates that he had to make a payment, and he didn't make the payment. So I pulled the fight. And quite rightly, I wasn't going to let any of my boxers go in the ring without me knowing that they were definitely going to get paid. And they weren't going to get paid, as we found out afterwards. The guy was a con man. But it was, it was one of those things where you have to make a stand. And my stand was, put your clothes back on, we're going home. And that was it.
So is that how close was it? Was it literally on the night, or?
Yeah, well, the weigh-in was 6 o'clock. I remember it clearly. And he was supposed to pay the money of the week of the fight. And he said to me, his famous words were, this is the promoter, said, don't worry. People always say, don't worry when you're supposed to worry. He said, don't worry. I promise I'll pay you Sunday. And the fight was Saturday night. And I said, no, the fight, you have to pay me this week. I said, and this week finishes at 6 o'clock on Friday. And by 6 o'clock on Friday, we have to be in funds, or my boys are not getting on the scales to weigh in for your fight, because there isn't going to be a fight. And I don't know whether he thought I was bluffing or whether I would let it go through. But at 5 to 6, there was no money. I said, right, everybody out, we're going home. And that was the end of that. Which was, people can get injured in fights. And now, we know there's a risk in boxing, of course there is. But there shouldn't be a risk of getting paid. And there was a huge risk because, of course, what he was relying, stupidly, relying on a walk-up to pay the boxers. Well, you can't. One of the fighters actually sued Bob Arum. I think it was Tommy Morrison. And I had to go to the court case. And the judge asked me the same question. Why? Why did you pull the fight out? Why did you pull your fighters out? And I explained the situation. And the judge said in Las Vegas courts, he said, you did exactly the right thing. You were looking after the interest of your boxers. And that's what I'm paid to do.
And am I right in saying that was John Daly? So he's the guy who didn't come up with the funds, yeah?
Yeah, well, he had a sort of strange track record. He produced that very good, was it Platoon, I think it was called, the movie. Mm-hmm. He was a movie producer from Hollywood, and he was supposed to be he was the one who had the original idea for the Rumble in the Jungle, which was effectively taken over by Don King during the build-up. But he started off as John Daly's idea, which he never forgot. But he just didn't have the money to do what he wanted to do. And there's an awful lot of people in life that have great ideas and have operations, but they don't have the money. They don't have the collateral to stand their corner. And those type of people I don't tolerate.
Absolutely. Just want to talk about, obviously, Eddie taking the reins at Matchroom Boxing.
Yeah.
How proud are you of the job he's done?
Well, yeah, of course. You're always proud of your kids, and I'm astonished how good he ended up being, to be honest with you. But it was quite difficult. I mean, Eddie is like another version of me, but just much brighter, much better as well. In today's new world of technology, social media and all that sort of stuff. When he came to me, I don't know, was it now 10 years ago, and said, I want to run the boxing, it was quite difficult for me to give up the reins because of my personalities. I like to control things. But, I decided to give him his chance, and he surpassed any expectation I might have had. He has developed into a world-class operator, far better than I was or ever was, and certainly far superior to anything else that exists in the market globally. It's a new world now, as you know, while you're doing this. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, no one would be doing what you're doing, would they? Didn't exist. Yeah. So the world changes, and people like Eddie have helped change it and taken boxing to a newer level with the digital markets and pay-per-view markets that now pay fighters the type of money they could only ever dream about in the past. And anyone who truly loves boxing knows that the fighters should be looked after beyond anything else.
So he approached you 10 years ago. Prior to that, was there any thought
Yeah,
from yourself to do
well,
it?
when he first came over, I mean, basically Eddie went off from school, similar to his dad. He didn't go to university. He went off from school and he joined a selling company, and then he went into a sports sponsorship company, and he was quite successful, along the way. And after a few years, I said to him, it's probably time for you to join the family business now. And I gave him my golf interests. So he was managing golfers on the US Tour and the UK PGA Tour. And then I bought the PGA Euro Pro Tour, so he was involved in that. And after a few years of that, we were having a poker explosion, online poker. We were the dominant world providers of poker programs. And I moved Eddie over to run the poker division, which he made very successful. So he'd proven himself over a number of years that he could run businesses. But boxing is a unique, as you know, it's a standalone, unique business, quite unlike anything else out there. But he always had a passion. I mean, from 7 years old, 8 years old, I'd be on the phone arguing with Don King or Bob Arum, and Eddie would be always there. When we went to shows from 9, 10 years old, he would nearly always come with me. He was passionate about boxing. He had a go himself. He was decent without being spectacular, but he knows enough about how to hold his hands up. So which is important. So he's been destined to do it, and I'm very, very proud of the job he's done.
Also, on your Wikipedia page, it mentions about you nearly went bankrupt in the early 90s. Obviously, you looking back now, you're very, very successful. If you don't mind me asking, what happened at that stage?
Yeah. Well, when I was in the textile business in America in the 70s, I used to absolutely love watching ESPN, and I used to think, why haven't we got anything like this in the UK? And then I thought, as my business started developing a little bit more, after I sold the snooker clubs in '82, I had quite a lot of money. I started doing more and more sports, and I was really waiting for something like ESPN to come into the UK. And I was probably 2 years early, but I started creating lots of events ready for the shortage of program that would exist. But I was doing that in 1988. There was a global recession, and I was losing a few £1 million. So it was sensible money I was losing. And there was a time when you think, oh, well, that was a good run. I can always go back to being a chartered accountant, because that qualification lasts for a lifetime. So I'm never going to starve. I'm never going to be poor. But I wanted to be a sports promoter. And for a couple of years, it was very tough, very tough. And then Screen Sport, Eurosport, and then in 1990, Sky came in, and Sky changed the world of sport that we live in. And I've been with them since 1990. Their longest supplying customer. I supply more hours than anybody else across a whole range of sports. So I owe an awful lot to Sky, and the fact that they brought sport to the nation, which in this time of endemic, we're actually missing it, aren't we, all the time? But pre-1990, we never had it at all. And Sky changed the sporting landscape in this country, and I was one of the biggest beneficiaries.
How much involvement in Matchroom boxing do you still have today, or is it all Eddie's?
All Eddie's. I mean, I'm involved as a fan, and of course I know a lot of people, so there are times Eddie will say, have a word with such and such about something or other, because we may have I got inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2013 or something, so I know a lot of people, but no, it's Eddie. He's 100% in charge of the company, 100% in charge of the decision-making process. The company's substantial, so he has a huge financial backing on any project he wants, and he's my son, so whatever he says, I let him do it, because so far he's been proved to be right far more times than me. So no, he's the man.
You mentioned being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Prior to that, did you ever feel that you had the recognition of where you'd got to, or was it at that point when you felt that you sort of made it as such?
No, recognition. is a word I don't really understand. The only person I need recognition from is me. I don't value other people's recognition. It's a compliment, of course, if you've got an ego. The recognition I get is from numbers, because I'm a numbers man. And I know that numbers, unlike people, don't lie. So the truth is there in black and white, and I can judge my performance better through numbers than someone whose opinion I may not necessarily value, recognising my ability. Because I don't know anyone. There are very few people in the world I would respect enough to say, "Oh, that's a compliment coming from you," if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, the man in the street recognition is created through media, but that's not necessarily, it's not necessarily true even, is it? So no, I didn't need any recognition. Well, I've got an ego the same as everyone else, and I like a compliment, of course. But in the cold light of day, the real value is there what you've achieved. What have your fighters done with their life after boxing? What have you done with prize funds in darts or snooker or pool? How's the fishing, the ping pong, the 10-pin bowling, the poker, the golf? These are all numbers, and numbers tell you much more than just gossip and rumour.
Absolutely. And just finally, have you, obviously you mentioned there, Matchroom Boxing is all ladies. Do you still have ambition for the boxing side going ahead in the future?
Yeah, I have ambition for all of the companies in the Matchroom group. It's a huge family business. We've got some fabulous staff and people that I hope really enjoy working for us. I think we've got the best reputation of anybody in boxing, and have had for the last 30-odd years, in terms of integrity and honesty, paying their fighters, paying everybody on time, doing the right thing. It doesn't mean we're an easy touch. It just means that we're honest and we tell the truth. So I look on boxing's future as, I don't know how it's going to go. Goodness me, picking a good time to talk about boxing at the moment. We're starved of it, aren't we? I can't wait for it to get back into action, and it will one day. I'm not sure when. And when it does, we will be positioned to be, as we are, the number one global player in the industry. And I think under Eddie's leadership and his team, that's something that would be very difficult for anyone to dislodge us from.
Absolutely. Barry, thank you very much for your time.